hi everybody. I'm Scott, and I'll be. We're gonna. I guess we'll give a little presentation today about Rhino Inside Revit, and then hopefully it'll be short enough that we have a long time to discuss. And Ehsan and I can answer any questions you have, whether about what we have, or what we're working on, or what our plans are, all those kinds of things. And just so you know, Ehsan's the Revit expert here, so I'll do my best as I struggle through this, and then we'll go from there. Hopefully everybody can see my screen, which is Revit. So let me just give you a quick kind of background as to what's happened and what Rhino Inside Revit really is. So Rhino 7 was just released, I don't know, a couple months ago as a commercial product. So it's out of beta, it's in release mode. And Rhino 7 has kind of a special property to it in that it can be embedded inside other applications. And so, there's a connection to Tekla, it runs inside of Unity and Unreal, actually. And it's different. There's different places, BricsCAD, things like that. But one of the most exciting ones that we kind of did early on and discovered that it actually worked is we're able to now embed Rhino inside Revit's memory space, and so this allows not to just we're not transferring through file format or through some kind of named pipe. We're actually inside Revit, and so everything you can do in Rhino, you can do in Revit now, and all the plugins that run in Rhino and all the plugins that run in Grasshopper run in Revit. All the file formats that Rhino reads and writes, Revit can read and write now, and through the Rhino interface. And so it's this is far beyond interoperability. We call it integration. So it's a true integration between two applications that now officially are one. And so we'll kind of take a look at that. This is supported on Revit 2018 through 2021. And what you do, what you need to have is Rhino 7. You have to have your Revit, and then you install a little stub that's free that you can download, Rhino Inside Revit. And what that does is that adds on the add-ins page here, on the add-ins tab, you can see that you now get this little Rhino button. And so it's important to understand is that normally when Revit starts up, you'll get that button, but it doesn't use a Rhino license yet. And then once you click on this, it'll go through the process and it will try to load Rhino in Grasshopper inside Revit's memory space. And it's successful doing that, it will come up with this toolbar. And there's different things that you can do here. You can start Rhino, which we're going to do here in just a second. We can import 3DM files directly to using our 3DM importer as opposed to the one that comes with Revit. And we can do things like categorize things and put different direct shapes and categories and things. We can turn off and on preview. We can actually edit Python here. This is actually the Rhino Python editor, but the Rhino Python editor can access both the Revit API and the Rhino API simultaneously. So you can actually write Python scripts now that include both APIs and both calls, and you have the whole of the Rhino geometry kernel available to the Revit API in Python and in C# for that matter. So we can start Grasshopper and some other pieces here. We also have what we call a Grasshopper player, which some of you might be familiar with players in Revit, and so that you can write commands with Grasshopper and just play them, and that works too. Another important piece of this, as we talk about PyRevit, PyRevit has the ability to make custom toolbars, and those custom toolbars can include both Python and Grasshopper and Dynamo scripts. So you can actually create your own custom toolbars with all your custom routines too with PyRevit and Rhino Inside. So let me just kind of show you how this works really quick. When you start Rhino, you hit here and it starts up Rhino here. This is just standard everyday Rhino 7. But it does know it's running inside of Revit. And so when I start up Grasshopper, there's a few new toolbars that come up with Grasshopper when you're inside Revit. So this is Grasshopper running inside Rhino inside Revit. So it kind of starts to understand the stack there. So you can see we have Revit primitives here, different kinds of Revit primitives that we can access directly through Grasshopper. We also have a Revit toolbar that comes up, which has things like being able to add beams and columns, deal with categories, create direct shapes, deal with families. We can actually interrogate elements, things like we have a really extensive way of working with Revit materials directly. So you can actually use Grasshopper as a material editor in Revit, which is kind of fun. We can deal with parameters and different bytes here. We have a whole section on walls because walls themselves are a fairly sophisticated category or family. And so they have their own kind of piece here. But you can see, and we keep adding to these. These are things that we continuously add to. So there'll be more and more of those. But so that's where you kind of find how you can do things in Revit. And so let me just open a example here so you can kind of get an idea how this works. I think we'll start with this one here. And so I use a lot of one of the things we're trying to solve at the very start of this was people were complaining and wondering, how do I get my Rhino geometry? A lot of people use Rhino for design. How do I get my Rhino geometry and move it into Revit? And so this is kind of the initial question, and we can do that in a number of different ways. And this is one of the nice parts about this connection now, is that you can do it with direct shapes. I have examples where we're throwing 100,000 elements into direct shapes. It's very, very quick. You can use them in drawings really quick, for a competition or something like that. But we can also be more rigorous or intentional on how we get things across. And so in this case, what I have is let's say this is a canopy here that's custom built. It's going to be dropped out on site. And one of the things I need to do is I have these footings that we need to have the footing person kind of put in. And then we're going to have this other piece fabricated and we're going to drop that in. So the Grasshopper definition can actually reflect that. And again, I'm using Elefront, which is a plugin for Grasshopper that's free. And it goes through and it allows me to select objects by type over in Grasshopper or Rhino. So in this case, I'm grabbing all the B-reps. I'm finding everything on the foundation layer, which are all these concrete pieces there. And then what I'm doing is by going to family here, I can create a new component family. So that's right here. And the new component family is going to be a structural foundation template here. You can see that. And it's in the structural foundations category. And then it's named canopy footings. And so what it does is it takes all that geometry, wraps it up in a new family. Of course, those of you that are really familiar with Revit is that you don't insert families, you insert types. And so we have a little unit here that goes and finds the types in this family, which is only one because it's a component family. And then what we can do is we can insert that family into Revit. And so you can see here that we have these footings here. They're a component family. Each one of these could have been an instance, by the way, of a type, a single type, but in this case I was lazy and I made them all one. But you can see we have the canopy footing here. It's structure foundation type. And what I can do, which is really interesting here, is because these are B-reps in Revit now, I can actually edit this family here. I can grab these objects, and there's some light editing that I can actually do to these, even if Grasshopper and Rhino weren't around. I could do this. Now I'm not going to save this change because of course Grasshopper is in control right now. It'll just change it right back. And I can disconnect that connection. But you can see that I can make, real families with real geometry through this. And so I'm just going to close this. and we'll get back to the overall model, hopefully. And so there we go. So now let's take a look back at a little bit more about this definition. So I'm over on this side, and so there's a lot more happening in the rest of this. I've got some roof panels and some columns and things like that. And so what I can do here is I can actually, using Elefront and some other filtering, we can go through and I can actually say, here are the layers of the objects in Rhino. And then I can map those to subcategories in Revit. And so here's the subcategories I'd like to use right here. And in fact, I can actually assign materials to those objects too. I do a little sorting of those. And then by going to, I can create the subcategories if I need them. I can also create the material names if I need them. If they don't exist, they'll get created. Then I push those all into essentially a form mixer, mixes all the subcategories with the forms and all those pieces. Then we get to the family again, a new family. This is on a site family because I'm going to use subcategories. So I got to find a category I can use subcategories on, or a family I can use subcategories on. We're going to call it walkway. I mix that all up, find the type like I did before, and insert it. And what I get over here is I get a family here with all the different subcategories and pieces like that. And then you can see what I can do here is I can go through and we can actually, using subcategories, I can, let's see what I get here. I can go through and actually change graphically how these things look, and based on the different subcategories and using view filters and all those things. And so you get to the, you can really start to inform the model, the BIM model, create the BIM model in a way that works well in your Revit schema. And so that's one of the big advantages you have here. And of course that can change over time, like you might, for instance, have floor plates that are going across and are official, but you might be using, like, you might still be working on the facade. So the facade might be direct shape objects, which you're going to just use temporarily until the facade kind of settles down in the design. So there's a lot of options here for your workflow. Now, we don't just do forms and we don't just do direct shapes. We can also drive native families, system families. So I'm going to just jump out here and show you how we might do that a little bit. And I'll close this. And I think we'll leave that one open for right now. Let me close this and get on to a different template here. So when you move on to doing native objects in Revit, a lot of times instead of just moving the geometry over, you're actually going to move a piece of geometry in Rhino over that has, and by the way, this is not just the geometry, this is all the parameters too. So you can add all the data that you want from the Rhino model into the Revit model if you want. But you might just move a curve over, for instance. And so let's open that up a little bit. Take a look at that. So I'll open, let's do, yeah, that looks about right. All right, so this is, you can see here, instead of having all the geometry, we just have or all the final geometry, we just have some curves and points and things like that. And so I'll go to a different way. In this way, this one is going to, instead of just taking geometry over and making families, it's going to go and actually drive some pieces, or some native objects, some system families. So in this case, I'm going to take some floor curves, and I'm going to move along here, find all the curves on floor and all the curves on roof. And then what we're going to do is I'm actually going to find the name on those curves, and I'm going to find the elevation of the curves, and I'm going to create a new Revit layer. So we go over here to, I have our level. So I have a level here. I can add a level, and then it creates that level, named that, and at the same time, it's going to create a floor, which is a native floor using a standard, standard type in Revit. Here's all the types that happen to be in this model. And then I'll just enable this here. And so it's interesting what happens here. So it takes those curves, which I could have picked, but I just filtered for them on the layer. It creates those curves, or it takes those curves, it creates the native floors in Revit here. You can see they're native floors. You can't tell that these weren't created. You can't tell that these weren't just created by hand in the first place, actually, except Grasshopper's in control at this point. And if I do, what's interesting too is then those floors are actually previewed back in Rhino. So it's the curves in Rhino, the floor is created in Revit and exists in Revit, and then it's previewed back in Rhino, which is kind of fun too. So you can see how they're both updated all the time. What's nice about this is if we were to disconnect Rhino and Grasshopper to this, and somebody wanted to change this, I can go and, like I did before, is we can pick on this. I can go and I can edit the I can edit this floor. Let's see here. Oh, I can't edit the floor right now because
Scott, I think you have to unpin it first.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah. See, I gotta remember all these things. That is an important piece of this is when Grasshopper creates objects, everything in Revit is pinned. And so if you want to edit it, you unpin it, and that way you can get to it directly. And then we can edit the boundary, and you can actually see if I go in here and I click on this, I actually have the ability, it actually gives me the dimension. And so I could edit that, and it actually edits with Revit. And so that originally, of course, was a Rhino curve. But let's say that you disconnect Grasshopper and it's gone downstream in the project further, that's you have this kind of ability depending on how you make the thing. Again, I'm not going to save that change because Grasshopper is actually still in control. But we're just going to do that. And so I'll just disconnect that edit. But that is the kind of level that you have. So we can do floors, and these levels here were created by Rhino and Grasshopper. Grasshopper named them and created them on the fly. So you can kind of keep all that in sync. This also goes the other way. You can take levels and bring them into Rhino if you want to, all that kind of stuff. Just the last piece I want to show here before we get on to your questions and answers, because we want to make sure you have a lot of time to do that, is we can do things like just take some points out of here, and I can create some columns with them. So the points that were in Rhino here, you can see they're right here, and they just created the columns. What's fun here is if I am in Rhino and I edit this roof height, you can see that the columns in Revit respond. So you can set up some active ways of these two working together. Another way you can do this is if I want to I want to drive adaptive components. And so we'll just go in here and I'll enable this. So we can drive adaptive components through Grasshopper. And that'll just take a second to populate. And so you can see that in Grasshopper, or in Revit, the adaptive components were created here. Excuse me. And then if I come in here, we can have some fun with this. These are previewed. I can come in here, instead of using the same adaptive component, what I can do is have Grasshopper randomly place two different adaptive components. And so you can see that it can just randomly do this, or you can have it react to where it is on the facade and have Grasshopper select different adaptive components on the fly and have it edit those things. And in fact, I have a little slider here that will look at different random patterns that you can go back to. So if you want to go through and look at different patterns in this case, this is Grasshopper driving Revit's adaptive components real time. And so there's a lot of options here, but what's nice about doing some of the methods this way is, of course, these are system families, just standard Revit system families that and creating real Revit objects. So Revit's doing the generation of the geometry. And then all the parameters that come along with it. That's all possible. So anyway, so that's just a quick overview of some of the things you can do. I want to, if you're interested in more of this, I want to be the Rhino Inside Revit website is the place you want to go. And I want to point out two different places. There's three, I guess. There's Getting Started article. That's where you can get it started. Talks about install. There's guides. These guides are all the different, talk about, for instance, how we deal with walls in Revit, how we deal with doors and windows in Revit, how we deal with adaptive components, different pieces like that, how we deal with rooms and areas and spaces. And we're still working on this website, but and then from right here is, Rhino to Revit. This is the most popular guide by a long shot. And if we go in here, it talks about how to create direct shapes, how to create loadable families with subcategories, and how to do native Revit elements. And a lot of what I showed here today is in this guide. And so you can go through this, but it also has some, talks about the different pieces and what you can do. And so I highly recommend, as you're exploring this, is get to this guide and you can kind of work from there. Another thing that we have, which this video may end up on at some point, is if you go to Discover here, there's lots of different resources here from people in the community, different demonstrations, different tutorials, different discussions about how it's useful, all those kinds of things. Some people you will recognize because they've been on your cast here. And so, and we continuously are adding to this. So that's the Discover page and a great place. You can see that Marcelo, which I think he talked about a few months ago to all of you, there's a Revit Grasshopper for Revit manual, and includes Dynamo too. And that is right here. But there's a lot of other resources too. So I just want to make sure people knew kind of what the important selections were. The forums, if you want to get a hold of us, are right here. And we're on the forums all the time.